All right, Jane, I gotta ask you, and this is one of those questions that people have been pondering for millennia. Do you think reincarnation is real? I mean, really, truly real?
Oh, DONFELIXX, what a way to start! That's like jumping straight into the deep end, isn't it? My gut reaction, honestly, I'm torn. A part of me, the logical, scientific part, wants to say, absolutely not, it's wishful thinking. But then there's this other part that's just fascinated. What about you? Are you a believer?
Fascinated is a great word for it. I find myself leaning towards there's something to it. Not necessarily in the way you see in Hollywood movies, coming back as a specific historical figure with all your memories intact, but this idea of consciousness or a soul or energy continuing beyond one physical body, that just feels right somehow. It resonates with so many ancient traditions too, doesn't it?
It really does. I mean, you look at Hinduism, Buddhism, ancient Egyptian beliefs, even some early Christian sects, they all had elements of this idea. It's not just some fringe concept. But then, if it were real, why wouldn't everyone remember? Why is it only a few, usually children, who seem to have these vivid past life memories?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's one of the strongest arguments against it. If we're carrying over lifetimes of experience, why the memory wipe? Some theories suggest it's a mercy, actually. Imagine the burden of remembering every single joy, sorrow, regret, and mistake from dozens or hundreds of lives. That would be an unbearable weight.
That's a fair point. I never thought about it as a mercy. I always thought, well, if you don't remember, what's the point? How do you learn from your past mistakes if you don't even know what they were? It almost feels like a cosmic do-over without the benefit of the previous draft.
But that's where the concept of karma often comes in, right? It's not about remembering the specific events, but maybe carrying forward the lessons learned in a more abstract sense. Like you don't remember falling off that bike 100 times, but your body just knows how to balance now. Or maybe it's more about carrying forward certain tendencies or predispositions.
Okay, that's an interesting analogy. So not specific memories, but more like ingrained patterns or even personality traits. Like if you were a super generous person in a past life, maybe you come back with a natural inclination towards generosity, even if you don't remember ever being that person before.
Exactly. Or the opposite. You were a total jerk, and now you're born into a life where you have to learn humility the hard way. It adds a whole new layer to why some people just seem naturally gifted or inclined towards certain things, or why others face what seem like insurmountable challenges from birth.
That does kind of explain why some prodigies exist, doesn't it? Like a child who can play a piano concerto at 3 years old or speak multiple languages without ever being taught. It's almost as if they're picking up where they left off. But then, the skeptics would say that's just genetic predisposition or early exposure. It's so hard to prove.
And the skeptics have valid points, absolutely. We have to acknowledge that. But then you get into the cases that are really hard to explain away. Like the work done by Dr. Ian Stevenson at the University of Virginia. He documented thousands of cases of children claiming past lives, often with incredible verifiable details.
Oh, Stevenson's work is fascinating. I've read a bit about it. The ones where children would describe specific events, names, locations, and even family members from a previous life, sometimes in a different village or town, and then researchers would go and find those people and corroborate the details. Those are the ones that give me pause. And the birthmarks too, right? Where children would have birthmarks that corresponded to fatal wounds on the body of the person they claimed to be in a past life.
Yeah, exactly. Like the boy in India who had a birthmark on his chest that perfectly matched the knife wound of a man who'd been murdered, and the boy could describe the details of the murder. Or the child who had a malformed earlobe that matched the ear of a man killed by having his ear ripped off. That's a little harder to explain with genetics or imagination, don't you think?
It certainly is. I mean, if it were one or two isolated cases, you could chalk it up to coincidence or fraud, but when you have thousands of documented cases, with attempts made to rule out all other explanations, it starts to build a pretty compelling narrative. What's the biggest hurdle for you, personally, in fully embracing the idea?
I think the biggest hurdle is the lack of a clear, universally accepted scientific mechanism. How does consciousness transfer? What is the vehicle that carries it from one body to another? Is it quantum physics? Is it something beyond our current understanding of physics? Until we have some kind of framework for how it happens, it remains firmly in the realm of belief or speculation, even with all the compelling anecdotal evidence.
Right, the how is always the sticking point for me too. We can observe phenomena, but without understanding the process, it's hard to integrate it into our worldview. And then there's the population growth argument, which I find kind of amusing but also somewhat valid. If there are more people alive now than have ever lived before, where are all these new souls coming from? Are souls being created, or are there just more bodies available for existing souls?
That's a classic one, and it always makes me chuckle, but it assumes a very linear one-to-one sequential process. What if it's not? What if time isn't as linear for a soul? What if a soul could potentially inhabit multiple bodies simultaneously, or jump back and forth in what we perceive as time? Or maybe the pool of souls isn't fixed, and new ones are in fact being created. It's a vast universe, Jane. Who are we to say how many souls are available?
That's a very big thought experiment, DONFELIXX. If time isn't linear for a soul, then all bets are off. The idea that a soul could exist in the past, present, and future simultaneously, or even choose its next incarnation, that's pretty mind-bending. It almost suggests a conscious choice on the part of the soul itself.
Many spiritual traditions absolutely propose that we choose our parents, our life circumstances, our challenges, our lessons, before we even incarnate, that all the suffering and joy we experience is part of a grander curriculum for our soul's growth. It's a very empowering idea, actually, because it takes away the feeling of being a victim of circumstance and puts the responsibility back on our shoulders, even if we don't remember making those choices.
It is empowering, but it also means a lot of self-inflicted lessons, doesn't it? If I chose this particular brand of chaos in my life, that's a lot to unpack, but I can see the appeal. It gives meaning to suffering, which is something humans have always sought. To think that there's a purpose behind every struggle, every hardship, even if we can't perceive it in this lifetime.
Absolutely. It transforms suffering from pointless pain into a growth opportunity. And that, I think, is one of the most compelling emotional arguments for reincarnation. It offers comfort and meaning in the face of death and adversity. If this isn't the end, if there's always another chance, another lesson, another experience, then life takes on a whole different dimension.
I agree. It really does offer a lot of comfort, especially when facing loss. The idea that you might see loved ones again, or that their journey continues, is incredibly powerful. On the flip side, what about the idea of past life regressions? People undergoing hypnosis and recalling vivid details, sometimes even speaking forgotten languages or demonstrating knowledge they shouldn't have.
Regression therapy. Now that's a whole other can of worms, isn't it? While some people have incredibly profound and healing experiences through regression, critics often point to cryptomnesia, where forgotten memories from this life, perhaps from a book or a movie, resurface under hypnosis and are mistaken for past life memories, or the power of suggestion from the hypnotist.
Right, the subconscious is a powerful thing. It can conjure up incredibly vivid and compelling narratives, but then again, some of the specific details that come out in these regressions, when later verified, are just too uncanny. There's a fine line between an overactive imagination and genuinely accessing something deeper.
It's definitely a gray area. But what if it's not strictly memory in the conventional sense? What if it's more like accessing a collective unconscious, a library of all human experience, as Jung might have suggested? And sometimes, in that altered state, people tap into something that feels deeply personal to them, even if it's not a direct memory of their own soul's journey.
That's an interesting distinction. So it's not my past life, but a past life that I'm resonating with or drawing from. That makes a lot of sense, especially with the idea of archetypes and universal human experiences. It would explain why some people remember being a famous historical figure, which seems a bit statistically improbable if everyone's having unique past lives.
Exactly. It's a way to bridge the gap between individual past life claims and the broader, more archetypal human story. But let's step back for a moment. If reincarnation is real, what does that mean for how we live our lives right now? Does it change anything for you?
Wow, that's a big question. If I genuinely believed it, I think it would change everything. The way I treat people, for one. If everyone I meet could potentially be someone I've known before, or someone whose path I'll cross again, there's a much greater impetus for kindness and compassion, and my own actions would feel like they have much weightier consequences, knowing that whatever I put out into the world might eventually come back to me, perhaps in a future life.
Absolutely. It could lead to a profound shift in perspective. Less focus on immediate gratification and more on long-term spiritual growth. Less fear of death, too, which is huge. Imagine living a life where you knew, unequivocally, that death was just a transition, not an ending. How much bolder would you be? How much more would you dare to love, to create, to experience?
I think I'd be incredibly bold. It would certainly put a lot of current anxieties into perspective. Like that terrible job interview, just a blip on the radar of eternity. That embarrassing moment, barely a footnote. but it would also make every interaction, every choice feel deeply significant. No pressure, right? Just trying to make good karma for the next few millennia.
Well, maybe it's not about making good karma in a transactional sense, but just living authentically and learning. That's a good point about the pressure, though. If you believed you had endless chances, would it make you complacent? Oh, I'll get around to my spiritual awakening in the next life. Or would it free you up to fully embrace this one?
That's a really important nuance. I think for me, it would remove some of the paralyzing fear of getting it wrong in this one life. Like, this is your only shot, don't mess it up. It would be more about the journey and the lessons rather than some ultimate pass-fail grade at the end. That feels liberating, actually.
Yeah, exactly. The pressure cooker gets turned down a notch, and I think that liberation would allow for more genuine connection, more authentic expression. You're not trying to achieve some perfect outcome, you're just being and experiencing and learning. It's almost like life becomes a grand experiment.
A grand experiment with potentially infinite iterations. That's a concept I can get behind. So, at the end of the day, even without definitive proof, what's your take on the realness of it all, DONFELIXX?
For me, Jane, I think it's more real than not. The sheer volume of anecdotal evidence, the cross-cultural consistency of the idea, and the profound philosophical comfort it offers, it all points to something beyond mere coincidence or fantasy. I believe there's a profound energy or consciousness that persists. Whether it's exactly the reincarnation of a specific individual, or a more fluid evolving consciousness, I don't know the exact mechanics, but I do believe in the continuation of the journey. And you?
I'm still on the fence, honestly, but I'm leaning heavily towards the maybe. The scientific part of me needs more data, but the spiritual and emotional part of me finds so much beauty and hope in the concept. I think, at the very least, it's a powerful framework for living a more compassionate and meaningful life, regardless of whether it's literally true. And that, I think, is a pretty good takeaway, isn't it?
Absolutely, Jane. Whether it's a fact or a philosophy, the idea of reincarnation certainly makes you think about how you're living this life. And that's a conversation worth having. Thanks for exploring this cosmic question with me today.
My pleasure, DONFELIXX. Always a mind bender with you. Until next time, everyone, keep pondering those big questions.